Hi everybody, John Randall here today. Today I'm going to spend some time going through how I look after and replace, rebuild those little plastic parts that tend to break on our vintage sailboards. By example, I'm going to look at a very common breakage, which is with the Mistral centerboard that has these little plastic inserts in it, and it's these little inserts that tend to break. They come in sort of two varieties. There's a solid sort of plug that looks like this, and then we also have these sort of spring-loaded inserts that have like a little plastic end piece on them and a couple of shell pieces. Of course, there's plenty of other parts on your sailboard too that it can be broken but can also be rebuilt. So for example, here's a simple little batten end. I've been trying to buy some of these and I've had trouble, so I actually ended up making some myself. So let me show you, just by example. This is an original batten end for a Neil Pride sail, and this is the remade one, complete with a little slot in the end. Here's the original insert for the solid insert for the Mistral centerboard, and here's a few that I've remade. And then looking at things like the that little end piece I showed you, that's the original one. Here is a remade one. Now this one I haven't actually sort of tidied up or shaped since it's been poured. Here's one that I've actually done a little bit of sanding on, make it a bit smoother, make it look nice. And then also those shell pieces that I showed you before. These are the original ones, curved like that. And here's a remade one. Another one. So all you need to do is have a little bit of patience, and you've got to get a few materials. So the things you need to do this is some silicone molding material. Looks like this. I bought this in a kit off eBay. I think it was about 25 Australian dollars. This is a 1-to-1 ratio, so it's very easy to pour. You need something to stir with. You're going to need some epoxy resin. I really like this one, but there's plenty of different epoxy resins you can buy that are good. Get a marine one. If you want to add some color, you can buy this sort of silicone dust that you add to your epoxy when you do the pouring. You'll need some wipes, because it gets a little bit sticky, the whole thing, and you'll need something to actually do all your mixing in and to make your mold shape. Now the molds themselves, here's one that I've made earlier. This is made of silicone, so you can see it's kind of squishy, and then the epoxy will get poured into the inside of the mold. So I've actually got one that I prepared last night. Let me just show you. This is it here. I actually use like a little medicine cup, little plastic medicine cups, because they've got the actual sizes on the outside, or how much mixture that you're putting in, so you can sort of get the 1-to-1 ratios right. This has got the silicone in it. I poured it last night, and what I'm going to do is try and pull out the mold. So the silicone itself is quite rubbery. It's been curing for just a bit short of 24 hours. It doesn't actually stick to the medicine cup or the plastic, so it just takes a little bit to work it. Okay, and that's what it looks like as it's come out of the cup. Now I can reuse this cup as another mold. You can make your own molds out of cardboard or anything. And what I actually had inside this one is some batten pieces, some batten ends, and that's what I'm going to do. This one still feels a little bit soft, so I'm not actually going to go any further with this one till it cures a bit more. So let me show you how to make a mold. We'll do one for this piece, okay? This is that centerboard insert. So I've got my cup. I'm looking on the side here. It's got all different measurements. I want to get 50-50, so let me see. I think I will go with, on the side, oh, we've got drams. Okay, well, I'm going to go with 4 drams, 4 and 8. So just using the silicon mix here. I'm going to come up to the line here that says 4. Okay. And now 1-to-1 ratio on this. So that was 4. Now I'm going to come up to 8. For the rest of this. There we go. It's going to give it a really good mix. It's probably the most boring part of the video is watching me mixing things. All right, once you've made your mix up like this, and you've got your original piece, that's what I'm going to make a mold of. Basically, you just put your piece into the mixture. Now you've got to remember that there's got to be an access point at the end when you pour all of this out, or when this is cured. You've got to be able to get this piece back out of it. So you're going to have a hole somewhere, or you're going to need to position it so that if I just drop this straight in here, it's going to sink to the bottom. There we go, going down. So that the actual piece that I've put inside the mixture is touching the very bottom of the mold. And when I actually unplug it, or when this is cured and I get the original piece back out again, because it has been touching the bottom of the mold, that will be an open space. And I need the open space, A, to get the piece out, but also so I can put my, my resin in. So we'll just let that sit now. Okay, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to actually show you the other part of this, and that is with a mold I've already created. How do you actually go about pouring in or preparing your mixture and then pouring it in? Now, when it comes to actually preparing your epoxy mixture, before that, you might even want to prepare your mold a little bit. So here's what I found. With this silicon molded material, you can pretty much just pour the epoxy in it and it's fine. It doesn't stick to it. But if you want to be 100% sure, then you can buy this stuff here. It's called mold release, and it's a silicone oil. You spray it into your mold and it just stops the epoxy sticking. So maybe I'll put a little bit in. I usually give it a spray and then just leave it for a couple of minutes. So let's see if we can get some in here. Kind of just let that work in there a little bit. Maybe I'll do, let's see, that was one of the plugs. Maybe I'll see if I can do one of the little button pieces that goes in the end. And I might have a shot at doing another batten end. Okay, we'll just let that sit for a couple of moments. While we're waiting for the mold release just to dry, as I said, a couple of minutes, I want to talk about the actual epoxy itself. So for a lot of things, you can just pour your epoxy resin once you've mixed it straight into the mold and it's going to be good as gold. But if you want to add a little bit of extra strength, then you can actually add some fiberglass sheeting, and you can buy this. This is inexpensive. It's just a few dollars. You can buy it on eBay, you can buy it on Amazon, Temu, anywhere. So what I'm going to do is actually cut some pieces off this, and I'm going to actually stuff them into my mold, and it'll just add a little bit of extra strength. It is kind of messy, so this part of the video I'm probably going to speed up. Okay, now regardless of whether you've decided to put in some of the fiberglass mesh or not, you're just going to pour straight, just the straight epoxy into your mold. This next part's the same. So I'm just going to mix up my epoxy resin. Now this particular one I'm using is a marine epoxy, platinum brand, and you mix 2 parts of the resin to 1 part of the hardener. So I'm actually going to put the hardener in first, just into my little mixing cup I've got here. And what I like to do is add my color. This, and as I said, you don't have to add colors, but I'm going to add a little bit of this blue silica. You can buy it cheap, $5, different colors. You can buy it on Amazon, you can buy it on eBay. You can see where I do all my shopping, even Temu. So I'm just putting a little bit in there. I can't tell you how much, it varies every time. It's going to mix it in here. So I'm just mixing my color in with my hardener at this point. Now, depending on whether I have enough resin or depend on whether I fill all of these 3 molds. All right, that's, looks like it's mixed all right. Now we're going to put the actual resin in with the hardener. I don't think it matters which way you do it, resin first or hardener. And now we'll mix that all together. Now, one thing to note here, they don't always come out perfectly because you get bubbles inside the molds, especially in the more complex shapes. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. For example, I've got one of these, so this particular plug that I made came out really well, almost perfect. But I've got another one here that on the sides of it, I don't know if you can see, but it's not perfect, right? There's sort of gaps in the mold or in the final piece, but it really won't affect the performance. It just depends on the piece and where the imperfections are. All right, this is mixing up nicely. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour my mixed resin into the tops of my molds where I've got openings. Let's see, we'll start with this little button end piece. So I just pour it into the top of the mold where there's an opening, and I actually let it flow out of the top of the mold as well, because that can be sanded off later. This next one is the larger plug piece. Basically going to be another one of these. I'm going to pour it into the top of the mold. I'm kind of going to squeeze it a little bit as I go here to try and encourage the epoxy to make its way down to the bottom of the mold. Now this one, it'll be interesting to see how this one comes out because I put quite a lot of fiberglass in it, of the mesh, and I've noticed when you put the fiberglass mesh in, you're more likely to have sort of little gaps in the final product where the resin didn't fully permeate. And I probably should be wearing gloves when I'm doing this. You'll notice I'm kind of squeezing the mold as I'm pouring here. That's to try and get all of that resin to go in. While I'm doing that one, or while I'm waiting for that one, I'm going to put a bit in. This was the sail batten end. Now I've only used this mold once before. I think I showed you the piece that came out of it. What I've not tried with the sail batten end, because it's a very small, thin mold, I haven't actually tried putting fiberglass in. This will be the first time where I'm putting the actual fiberglass mesh in there as well. So I'm intrigued to see if the resin really gets all the way in there around there, because there's not much room. Well, a little bit more on this batten pocket one, or batten. It's not really a batten pocket. Now sometimes in your mold, if you've actually got like a piece that sticks up inside, like I do in this one, you might be able to sort of put a mixing stick in there to try and encourage that resin to get around, get all through the mold. I'm actually poking my little mixing stick in here to try and get things to move around a bit more. Same with the little button end one. Not a lot of room in the batten end. Okay, and that's it. We'll come back tomorrow. We'll have a look at the mold that we made earlier, and we'll have a look at these ones that I've actually poured the resin into. Okay, so it's now 24 hours later. I want to show you the results of the work. So first off, there was the mold that we made. So was trying to make a mold to replace one of the board inserts, which are these sort of looking things. Remember, we used a medicine cup, put the silicone in here, and then drop the original insert in. So let me just work this out. As I said, the silicone doesn't necessarily stick too much to the mold. In this case, I'm just using a medicine cup. I can actually get this one. So this is what it looks like coming out. And you'll see at one end, the bottom, that the original piece has actually sunk right to the bottom, and that's where I'm going to push this out from. So sort of pushing from the top here, you can see the original piece coming out. Kind of keep working on it. All right, you can see this coming out now. All right, there's the original, and this is the new mold. If I wanted to make something with this, I could just pour my silicone into the top here, and out would come one of these. And as you saw earlier, I had actually made some. So that was the first one. That's how to make the mold. Now what we're going to do is look at some of the resin pourings that we did last time. First off, we had this little button piece that comes out of a Mistral centerboard. Normally has a little spring behind it. This is the mold. We poured the resin in here. So I'm just going to show you, this is how I just get it out. Just kind of pull it around a little bit, and eventually the mold will release from the resin. Whoops, I dropped it. Okay, I'm just going to work it a little bit here. Okay, and out comes the piece. Now, it looks pretty messy at the moment, but I don't know if you can see on the side here, all of this top stuff, all of this bit at the top, that'll all just come off. Like I'll be able to either pull it off or just use a very light piece of sandpaper and then sand it and shape it. You can see here's the original. You can see the internal piece there. And then if you look at the profile on the side, you can see how that's going to be when the top is all shaved off and cleaned up. So that one's come out pretty nicely. We also I poured one of these. So here's the mold. Okay, and I was a little bit interested to see how this one went, because I actually put a bit of fiberglass inside it, and I wasn't sure if all of the resin was going to make its way around. So let's see. Kind of just got to work it a bit here. All right. So this has come out pretty nicely. And there's the hole in the middle there. The top will need to be cleaned up. This little piece just taken off with I can just tear it off, clean it up with a bit of sandpaper and just put the hole all the way through. But you can see one very, very minor little imperfection right there, but it doesn't matter because it's going to go inside the centerboard. So that's one done. So we've got our plug, we've got our little top, and then I think we also looked at a sail batten. So I think this was the sail batten one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can just work this. I'll kind of push this out a bit here. Hope I'm not pulling too many faces while I'm doing this. Let's see how this one came out. All right, so this is an example of one that didn't quite come out. I probably didn't put enough resin in. You see it didn't fill up to the top here. So here's the original. And you can see that one didn't quite make it at the top here. So I probably want to do that one again, or I potentially could try and put this back into the mold and pour a little bit more resin in. Okay, after I finished making the video last time, or for the first part of this, I did actually pour a couple of others, a couple more blue ones, and I did a white one. So let's just have a look at those just as a matter of interest. The first piece I was trying to create was this piece. And on a Mistral sailboard, you actually have two of these that attach together. There's a spring that goes in the middle and a couple of those little pins go on the end. So here's the mold. You can see I poured the resin in the top, and I'm going to open that up and we'll see how it went. The silicone is surprisingly strong, but it will degrade over time. Okay. All right, so this piece has come out pretty good. Again, the excess, that's just where I poured it. Let me just pull a bit of that off. That'll just get sanded off. But that's the new one. And here's the original. Pretty similar. And I've got one more here. It's the same piece. So kind of just work it out. See how this one came out. All right, well that one came out really nice and clean. And I've just got to clean up the little tag on the end there. So that's another one. And I did actually do a second batch after I made the first part of the video, where I made up some white resin, same process, but I just put some white coloring in it. So this is another one of those little button pin ends, for want of a better term, that get used in Mistral sailboards. So I'm just gonna, here we go. All right, that one's come out really nicely, if you can see that. Again, there's a little piece here at the overpour that I'll just have to sand off. But if you look at it from the side, you can get a pretty good idea. Bit hard to see when it's white. And then this is one I'm really unsure about. I've never used this mold. This was two batten ends off a Gastra sail. I have no idea how this is going to go. So here's what the actual original batten ends look like. At least there's one of them. So very simple. It's got a little, the batten goes in there, and then the other end, again, pretty simple, and the batten goes in there. Hopefully I've got that in here, we will see. All right, so this one I actually made one mold, and I put two different pieces in there, and then I filled it with resin. So let's see, let's go for the first one here, kind of working this. Okay, I think I've got the smaller of the two pieces here. You can build up some finger strength doing this. Okay. All right, here's the first one. This actually came out really nice. I'll show you. Actually, I think this is the larger of the two pieces. There it is. So there's the original, and here's the new one from the ends. And let's see if I can get the other piece out in here. This would be the smaller piece. Kind of working this. It's always kind of exciting to see how well they come out or not, and you know, it is a bit of a process, a learning process. Okay, this one's perfect. So there's the new piece, and the batten will go in that end there. So that's a really nice one. Actually, just looking at the end of it here, it's a little thin on the end, so I might even just put a little bit of just a drop of resin on there just to be sure, but that's come out really well. So hopefully that's useful if you decide to make your own molds. You know, just so you can see, I'm going to tilt the camera forward. I've got a bunch here that I've made, including the ones I've made on this video. As I said, rubber, different sizes. I use, for these small pieces, I use like a medicine glass, like a little medicine cup. Find the silicone doesn't stick to that, but you can use anything. I've even seen people suggest you can use like a toilet roll, and use toilet roll, and then, you know, just sort of put it on a base and sort of seal it so that the silicone doesn't come out. But yeah, just different molds. You can do two things in one mold. In fact, this mold here, I don't know if you can see, this one's probably just about done. I don't know how much more use I will get out of that one. It's starting to, the silicone does tear after a while. So, you know, they're not forever, but hopefully you don't need to keep building these pieces over and over again. Anyway, that's it. I hope this is useful, and hopefully I'll see you on the water.